and his policies. So we're going to look at a lot more of his foreign policies in particular. So remember, this is a Cold War. So this is the battle between basically the U.S. and the Soviet Union. So we're going to discuss a lot about them and kind of some of the things that are going to happen. We'll talk about the space race a little bit today. We'll talk about a lot of almost going to war. A lot of times we almost went to war. This will be known as brinkmanship. We'll talk about that as well. So lots to do today. Okay, so the new look. So Eisenhower believed the way to win the Cold War was actually through a strong military and a strong economy. So he believed that atomic weapons may be necessary, but he wanted to use them as a way to prevent war. Okay, so he wanted to basically his idea was to become really strong and be so strong that nobody would want to go to fight with you. So massive retaliation. This is basically the threat to use atomic weapons on any communist state that takes territory by force. So it's an over like it's almost a overreaction kind of to an enemy that is going to do something you don't want them to do. Okay, so it's saying, okay, well, you're going to do this one little thing, but if you do that, we're going to respond like way worse than you are. Okay. So new technology. So one of the new technologies is B-52 bomber. So that's the airplane there on the bottom, and they could fly across continents. So they could carry basically intercontinental ballistic missiles and submarines. These would be capable of launching nuclear weapons as well. So we were able to move nuclear weapons at a very quick pace because of the B-52 bombers and the nuclear submarines. So on October 4th, 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik. So Sputnik is that top picture there. This was the first satellite to actually orbit Earth. And so we felt like we were really behind in missile technology because obviously you need a missile to get a satellite up into orbit. And so in 1958, NASA was created. Okay, and so NASA obviously is going to spur on the space race, and they're going to eventually get to the moon. Okay. So brinkmanship. So I did mention this earlier, but brinkmanship is basically the willingness to go to war to force the other side to back down. So it's basically getting to the brink of war, hoping the other side backs down. So Americans felt that Eisenhower was too eager for war. But the Korean War ended with an armistice. So we talked about that, and when we talk about the Korean War, but the battle line is the line dividing North and South Korea, and it's still to this day, obviously, is still dividing that. So even though there was no real victory, communism is still continuing to spread. In 1954, China threatened to invade Taiwan, but Eisenhower threatened war, so they retreated. So that's kind of that brinkmanship right there. So they wanted to take Taiwan. We said no, and then they backed off because we were willing to fight for it. So the U.S. wanted to keep Arab nations from aligning with the Soviets. So we offered to help finance the construction of a dam on the Nile River. Congress wouldn't approve this, however, and so it doesn't actually end up happening. But the Egyptians are going to take over the Suez Canal. So the Suez Canal was built in the 19th century, early 20th century, and it's right here. It's a link to Asia and Europe without having to go all the way around Africa. Okay, so it's just like the Panama Canal is on this side of the world. So the British and French troops invaded the Suez because they wanted to take control of it. So the Soviets threatened rocket attacks, but once Eisenhower put pressure on them, the Soviets pulled back out of that. Actually, everybody pulled back out of that. So this right here is some examples of brinkmanship. Okay, so the Korean War, we actually obviously did go to war, and as well as the Vietnam War, which we'll talk about in another unit. There's a war in Afghanistan. There's been several Israeli wars. This Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962, and then in the 80s, there's Central South America. The U.S. Supported the anti-communist regimes, so we're trying to keep places all this from turning to communism. Okay, obviously Cuba didn't get that message. Okay, so fighting communism covertly. So brinkmanship didn't always work. So Eisenhower had to use covert or hidden operations. So this is when we see the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA, really come into use. After Stalin died, Nikita Khrushchev, that's this guy right here, he became the leader of the Soviet Union. Now he gave a secret speech, and the CIA found it. And basically, in the speech, he attacked Stalin's policies. And so the CIA decided to broadcast this speech to Eastern Europeans. And in reaction to this, riots are going to break out because so many people are really tired of communism. And so the Soviets had to use force to stop the riots. Um, so Eisenhower and Khrushchev agreed to a summit in Paris to improve relations. So they met in Paris, and Khrushchev stopped the summit once an American spy plane was shot down. So it didn't get very far. In his farewell address, however, Eisenhower did warn Americans to be on guard against the influence of what he called a military industrial complex in a democracy. So basically, the idea is that wars are very profitable for certain people. So to go to war constantly is something he said to be aware of. So his specific words were this right here. It says, in the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. Okay, so basically it's the corruption of using the military in a way to make profit for yourself. Okay, and we have seen this throughout the Cold War and even past the Cold War. We continue to see this. That's what I think a lot of people warn against still is not to use it for personal gain. So that's all I got for you guys today. Don't forget to do your processor, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.